Hello, welcome to lesson number 2. This lesson kicks off the primary material that we will be reading and starting with in this lesson for the remaining parts of the semester, and introducing the concepts of addiction. One of the primary questions we will be looking at this lesson is what is addiction, and looking at some ideas and opinions and thoughts based on what you already know or what society has taught us, and so forth. This is usually one of the more challenging lessons that we kick off the semester with in all of my classes based on the reading material. So in your DuPont book, we have items and try to answer, again, the question of addiction, and how addiction or drug use may look differently or may look different based on cultural perception, geographic region, and so forth. And the definition of addiction is quite different too, as well as how we treat drug use across different cultures and nations and so forth. Drug use in the United States is seen as a criminal issue. In most countries, it is not. And there's varying levels and different opinions and debates about levels of effectiveness. Since we do treat addiction as a criminal issue so many times in this nation, how effective is that? And I worked 6 years in the court system working with addicted individuals, and the criminal justice system is not very effective working with the addicted population. At the same time, the mental health system, the pure mental health system of non-substance abuse professionals, is not very effective either. So we have to find this balance of rehabilitation and punitive sanctions if the laws of society has been broken. And there's a big difference between someone who, just because someone uses, does not mean that they will go out and actively break the laws of society. But based on certain drugs, it certainly increases the percentages, honestly. We start talking about risk factors, personal risk factors that could be genetic, how we think about problems, circumstances, experiences, and so forth, and environmental problems or environmental risk factors. Those items are on page 12 of your textbook. It talks about, neighborhood you grew up in, family cycle, those type of things. One of the words to the rise is one particular factor does not increase the likelihood of addiction. It's a combination of factors, a combination of personal factors and environmental factors. Just because someone grows up in a family member of addicts does not mean that they themselves will be addicted. Just because grandfather and father were alcoholics does not mean that by itself that person will grow up to be an alcoholic. Just like it doesn't mean that if you have no family history of addiction that you will not. You could be. There are so many studies out there of twins, siblings, that had the same genetic makeup and family, generally speaking. One grows up to be an active user, one does not. And we ask, well, what was different? Everything seemed the same. And everything really was not the same because we're all individuals. Environmental factors, just because we may live in a community that there's very low drug use, does not mean that you're by itself that you cannot be a user or an addict. And just because you do grow up in a community that has high drug use does not mean that you have to be. Also, keep in mind, sometimes we use terms that we assume that people know. When I speak of user, I mean someone that uses, but is not necessarily addicted. There's a difference. Someone who uses can stop, in my definition, and in the standard definition accepted in society, at any time. They can make a conscious choice not to use. So I may smoke marijuana today and tomorrow, but not smoke again for 2 weeks, and I made that choice. An addict is someone who the choice is generally removed from them after a certain line. The line of addiction is very thin. So, and this goes back to page 14, the most controversial chart that you'll probably find in this chapter, is it talks about characteristics or identifying addiction. Someone who is addicted can unconsciously makes the choice to use based on their brain chemistry being changed. This is extremely complicated, and we'll talk about this more and more as we go along. But if you were to ask me what a addicted individual is someone who uses repeatedly, over and over and over, despite negative consequences, negative personal consequences, negative societal consequences, and you ask the person, why do they use, and they have no clue. I've worked with so many clients who were facing significant personal loss and significant time in secure custody, meaning 25 to 30 years, over such small drugs as marijuana, for example. Had one client once that was facing 16 years of an active prison sentence, and his original court charge was possession of marijuana, which ballooned into multiple probation violations, then a parole violation, then multiple new charges after that. And we were talking in the office, and I basically said, you know, we're facing 16 years if we don't find some way to help you get clean. And he said, Jamie, I've been smoking marijuana for 16 years, and I really don't have an interest in quitting, and I'm not even sure I could quit if I wanted to. And I realize, and I know what may happen to me if I continue smoking, but I'm willing to take that risk. And he also said, more than likely I can find my choice of drug in prison anyway, and I can continue smoking. If I stay out in the community, it'll be harder for me to continue smoking. So I'm sitting there as a really young counselor, asking myself, this person's willing to give up 16 years of his or her life just because he can't stop smoking for maybe 3 months, long enough to at least get off parole. And the answer is yes, he was addicted. My grandfather, for example, was an alcoholic, and many times we would ask him as family members, would just stop drinking, grandfather. We did not understand that he could not just simply stop drinking. He had been drinking for a long time, as long as I could remember, certainly, as a small child, and way before that. And asking him to simply stop drinking as a choice was unfair to him and any other addicted individual out there. You just can't stop if you've truly reached that point of addiction and crossed over the point of addiction. That does not mean you're not responsible for your actions, because you are responsible for your actions as you are under the influence of these drugs and alcohol. But simply asking someone to stop, or simply saying that they have a choice, well, yes, if you're a user and your brain chemistry and body and thinking process is not changed, and you haven't run over that fine line, then yes, according to current knowledge and acceptable thought in the field, you can stop. But once we cross over that invisible line of addiction, we will be talking about this semester, it's not that easy anymore. Now, I have met individuals who used for 20 years, who woke up one day and said, I'm not using anymore, and they haven't used since. Well, I don't think that person was addicted. They were never addicted to begin with. They were using heavily, yes, but for some reason, some of those personal and environmental factors did not add up, and they basically dodged the bullet of addiction. They were certainly misusing and abusing the drug, but not necessarily addicted. I'm one of the old-style folks who say once you're addicted, you're always addicted. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't live in recovery, because you can. In all honesty, treatment rates, success rates for folks getting clean and staying clean is actually higher for addiction than diabetes. But we don't hear this because it really doesn't sell newspapers, and it doesn't sound good on TV, but treatment rates is pretty high for folks who go through treatment. But what does happen is we hear about all the folks and family members who are not successful. We don't hear about the individuals that are successful. This chapter talks about drug testing. I spent many, many years drug testing folks. I will, later in the semester, actually compile a video of sorts about the typical process of drug testing clients, just so you can get a feel of the process with the equipment and so forth. Again, every agency, every drug testing service has a different protocol and process. This is only one of the examples I put in place. The chapter talks about 12-step meetings. Again, 12-step meetings are not the only end-all and be-all of treatment. There's all types of different treatments out there, but for some individuals and some clients, 12-step meetings are very important and extremely effective. Your author's a big believer in these 12-step meetings, so am I. Beautiful Boy, we need to start reading the book now. I will provide additional guidance in terms of what chapters you should be on as we go through the lessons, but please don't wait to read the text. This was a New York Times bestseller. Most students really enjoy it, to be honest. There's some corresponding materials that I will be sharing with you in the next lessons, some videos to watch. Nick, the subject of the book, has actually written 2 books, to be honest, and he still to this day struggles with staying clean. Of course, the book we're currently reading is from the perception of his dad. In the meantime, let's make sure we get started with this lesson, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for responding to my class meeting survey. We may try to meet sometime in late September, early October. I will be lining up that date, hopefully in a couple of weeks. And I look forward to talking to folks and hearing from folks on the discussion boards. And let me know if I can help. Take care.